But I tell you, when I have felt like an imposter is whenever, like if I was going to teach a workshop at the studio, and it was on like anything, like I mainly teach like yoga, mindfulness, creativity sort of stuff. And yeah, I'm like racing in there, I'm exhausted. I have definitely overstretched myself. And here I'm going in to teach tranquility. That's whenever I felt like an imposter because I'm like, oh, I do know what we're supposed to do. And I do feel like I have those answers and I can help you come up with ideas for practices and I can help support you and I understand the challenges around it. And yet right now in my life at this moment, I'm really struggling with it.
You're listening to The Creative Imposter, episode number 67. Welcome to The Creative Imposter. I'm your host, Andrea Klunder, and today I am talking with Kimberly Wilson. This has been a long time in the making. This has been a dream of mine since even before I ever had a podcast. Okay, let me take you back for a quick second. Kimberly Wilson has had a podcast since before the iPhone existed. In fact, when I first discovered her podcast, I didn't really even know what a podcast was. I just knew that a colleague of mine recommended I check out her website because she felt like there was a lot of similarities between Kimberly's entrepreneurial spirit and her multi-passionate business model and what I was trying to do at the time. See, back then I had my yoga studio that was in its infancy, and I was trying to bring in more than just yoga, like holistic practices and spa services and social opportunities and mindfulness. And I wanted to bring art and music and creativity into it. And I just couldn't figure out how to bring all these things together, let alone how to bring all these things together and actually make money, and pay myself and live. And so she recommended I check out Kimberly's website, which I did. And she had these things that you could listen to, these little audio files. So I started listening to them from my computer and then much, much later realized that I could listen to them from a phone. And I loved what Kimberly was doing. You're going to hear more about that in the episode, so I won't go too much into that. But suffice to say, she does a lot of different things and has this really creative, beautiful brand that incorporates a lot of her different loves and passions in a way that totally makes sense. Fast forward to several years later, I'm tired. My business is not doing so well. I need to do something different. So I finally signed up for an online course with Kimberly. I think it was called something like Conscious Business e-course or something like that. And it's a self-paced, self-directed e-course, but it also includes a private one-on-one coaching by phone with her. And that was the part that I really, really, really wanted. So we did that. And we talked about a lot of different things. She gave me so many great ideas. And one of the ideas that she planted in my brain was starting my own podcast. Among other things, Kimberly was at that time a yoga studio owner with 2 successful, or what I perceived to be successful, studios in the Washington, D.C. area. And I wanted advice as to how to make my yoga business work. And the podcasting thing sounded interesting. It sounded cool, but I don't know. That just seemed like a whole other thing. And I didn't have time, blah, blah, blah. Fast forward to a couple more years later, I close the yoga studio business. I am bankrupt. I am depressed. I don't know what I'm going to do next. Well-meaning friends say, well, you could always, give up on the entrepreneurial thing. It's cool. You gave it a try, but just go get a job. Take care of yourself. Ugh. Well, you could always start another business. Ugh. Well, you can always teach yoga at 500 other places, running around the city, making $20 here, $50 there, $40 there, teaching 1 million classes a week. But I was still listening to Kimberly's podcast. And here was the thing about that podcast and a few others that I was listening to at the time. In the midst of that depression and uncertainty and not knowing, I could listen to the podcast and I could imagine this alternate reality where I get to have these conversations with really inspired, successful conscious, creative people. And I get to record them and share them with an engaged, compassionate, dynamic community that I've built through the platform of the podcast. And there's a whole lifestyle brand around it where I can see myself in a beautiful environment that's really cozy and eclectic with a lot of sunlight, making art, sharing stories, connecting, drinking delicious tea, practicing meditation. And we get to travel and go on these different retreats. And business is good, and I'm supported and nourished and sustained. That was the alternate reality that I could see when I was listening to Kimberly's podcast, which, by the way, is called Tranquility du Jour. And so I felt like maybe it's time. Maybe now. I could start a podcast, and I don't really know how to make that into a business, but I could start a podcast. And that was really the beginning of the Creative Imposter, of Podcast Envy, of all of the work that's happening now. I have clients. I'm working on a big podcast project with the Santa Fe Opera. I have a growing community in Chicago and online via the Creative Imposter Facebook group. Finances are, well, improving. There's definite improvement and definitely room for more improvement. And I'm actually even going to be speaking at Podcast Movement, the largest industry conference of the year in Philadelphia this summer, about the high school mentoring program that I do here in Chicago. That alternate reality that was just a vision in my mind when I was listening to Kimberly's podcast years ago is coming to fruition. So I guess that means sometimes it takes more time than we think. Sometimes we don't know the how. Sometimes it even seems improbable. But when we have those guiding lights, when we have those people who have done it, are doing it, are in the midst, who are doing the work and making progress and holding the vision, whether they realize that's what they're doing or not, when we have those people that we can look to as an example of what's possible to create for ourselves, that's where we gather the resources and the strength and the faith to keep putting one foot in front of the other and do the thing. One of the major themes that is present in Kimberly's work is the theme of self-care. And I know self-care kind of has this like, we're maybe a little tired of hearing about this self-care thing. And like, I get it. I need to slow down. I need to rest. I need to nurture myself, meditate. But really, it's key. It's so important. It's so important. And I'm telling you this because it's also so hard. I know how hard it is to be consistent with this, to do it without feeling guilty, to make the space, to make the time, and to see how intrinsically important it is to living a sustainable, creative life. And so probably in many ways also inspired by Kimberly's work and Tranquility du Jour, I am inviting you to get serious, real serious, about your self-care. Starting May 17th and running through the beginning of July, I'm offering the Summer Self-Care Society. This is an online 8-week program, community, course, challenge. I don't really know what to call it, but it is 8 weeks of a group of dynamic creative women getting together through the powers of the interwebs in a real community setting through video chat sessions, whereby we'll be connecting with different holistic practitioners to learn creative ways that we can engage in the kind of self-care that's a little deeper, more magical, and in some cases more practical than taking bubble baths and writing gratitude journals. Though, trust me, there's nothing wrong with taking bubble baths and writing gratitude journals, but we're going deeper than that. Each week, there will be a different challenge, and as you complete these challenges and explore new ways to take care of yourself, you'll get points. And those points will turn into prizes. Because, who doesn't want prizes? You can learn more about the Summer Self-Care Society at thecreativeimposter.com/SSS. Also linked, of course, in the show notes for this episode in whichever app you are using to hear my voice right now. And also at thecreativeimposter.com/067 for episode 67. And right now, you can get a huge discount off of your enrollment when you sign up by April 22nd and become an early adopter. All you need is the offer code EARLY. And when you do that, not only will you save off of the session itself, you will also get a welcome gift in the mail from one of our guest practitioners, Dina Ranaday from an Herbal Diary podcast. She'll be sending you an intuitively selected blend of herbal tea just for signing up early. Don't wait. Sign up by the 22nd. Get that early adopter price and your herbal tea, and let's take some good care. Of course, also in the show notes, you will find links to all things Kimberly Wilson, including her Tranquility clothing line. And let me just say, side note, I've been looking at Kimberly's clothing line for a long time, It's like soft, organic, jersey knit, cotton, and bamboo clothing with classic cuts and solid colors that are easily mix and matchable and layerable. It's the whole fashion ideal that I always strive for, which is like yoga chic. You can wear it to the yoga studio, you can wear it to work, you can wear it out, and you always look and feel amazing. But it's always been just slightly above my comfortable price range for clothing. And just recently, I participated in one of Kimberly's seasonal free online intention setting sessions, which was amazing in and of itself. And one of the perks of showing up for that session was a little discount code for her clothing line. And I was like, this is it. This is the moment. I'm going to splurge. I'm going to treat myself. And I just ordered her new jumpsuit and a long sleeve t-shirt and some arm warmers. And I just got them in the mail like 2 days ago, and they're incredible. I just want to get rid of all of my other clothes and only wear these clothes, I swear. I felt so luxurious putting them on. And really just the whole experience of receiving the package, opening it up. There's a little lavender sachet in there, so it smells so lovely. And a little lavender Tulsi tea bag, a handwritten thank you from Kimberly. And of course, the clothes themselves. It just felt so amazing. Like she had really taken the time to pay attention to details and take the care to affirm that energetic exchange of receiving her clothing. So thank you, Kimberly. And I don't know, maybe it's time to get something new for spring and summer. Check it out. All right. And no, she did not pay me to say all of that. That is just my own true, I love when an online shopping experience can be that amazing. All right. So as we move into this conversation, the first thing I did was ask Kimberly to explain all the many things that she does. So here it is, my conversation with Kimberly Wilson of Tranquility du Jour.
So let's see, the things that I do. I'm a psychotherapist in private practice. So that's somewhat newer since you started listening to the podcast. Mm-hmm. And that was a 7.5-year journey. I went back to school in 2009 and then got my license and started private practice over a year ago. So that's been a fun journey and evolution. I am the founder of Tranquil Space Yoga Studios in Washington, D.C. and Arlington, Virginia, and just sold those last fall to YogaWorks after 18 years of nursing and caring for and feeding those two little babies. And Yeah, I've been podcasting since '05, which is crazy, before podcasts were even really understood. And I, don't think that I even really understood what I was doing at that time.
So wait, how did you even know to start doing that?
Well, it's funny. My boyfriend, he's super duper techie, and he had started a podcast for his job. It was like Supreme Court's, like different justices, like they were following, I guess, people who were, up for nomination. And so it became this really big deal. And he got like podcasting for idiots or something. And I remember thumbing through the book and being like, oh, this would be super fun. And so that's how it started. And what's so funny is I remember the first episode, we were in Mexico at a friend's wedding, and I made him go into the bathroom while I recorded it because I felt so embarrassed or just like so shy and awkward. And I read it verbatim. Like, it was so funny. So if you were to listen to the first episode of, back then it was called Hip Tranquil Chick, because that was a book I was writing at the time.
Right.
And I'm basically talking into the microphone, or probably just into the computer actually, and reading verbatim what I was saying. So it's kind of funny evolution. And now I think I just released like 421 or something, so it's been many years of podcasting.
That's amazing. And so what else?
Yeah, and so I've got a clothing line, and we just released our spring collection. I've had that since '02. It's called Tranquility, and it's basically organic cotton and organic bamboo jersey, and super duper cozy and comfy with like wrap dresses and palazzo pants, so really kind of sweet. This season I released a duster. So really kind of fun pieces that are locally sewn, and again, all eco-friendly. And then I have a nonprofit. It's been called Tranquil Space Foundation, and now we have a new project under it called the Pigs and Pugs Project. And so that's, honestly, when you ask what I'm excited about, that is what I am super duper excited about.
Okay, so tell us more about Pigs and Pugs.
Yeah, so for 10 years, we focused on tranquil teens. So basically, we took this programming to teens around the area, focused on yoga, creativity, and leadership. Well, then really my focus, I think, began shifting much more to animals, and probably around '07, I adopted my first rescue pig from Farm Sanctuary, and pretty much it's been the rest is history with pigs since then. I'm like obsessed. And so with this transition, I was kind of like, we've done the teens thing for 10 years. Let's create curriculum, put it out on the internet so anyone can access it, and let's shift directions. And so Pigs and Pugs, somehow that just rolled off the tongue, and it just felt like the next thing. And so basically, like just recently, we hosted a film screening of a wonderful film I highly recommend everyone watch, called The Last Pig. And it's about a pig farmer in New York who writes this article, I think, for Modern Farmers, basically like, I've been raising pigs for 10 years and I think what I'm doing is wrong. And so this filmmaker reads the article and asks if she can follow him as he goes through his last pigs and stops being a pig farmer and turns to organic vegan farming vegetables. And so it's beautifully shot. I mean, it's stunning. There's very little dialogue. It's really a wonderful kind of snapshot into this man's challenge. And, you really get to see like beautiful pigs. It's stunning. So just recently did a film screening of that. So with Pigs and Pugs Project, it's thought about awareness raising. In June, I'm going to have a yoga and the animals, where it's like we do yoga out at an animal sanctuary and you get to meet the animals. And then my partner makes a vegan lunch for everyone. And so that's just a really fun experience. So that's kind of the event aspect of Pigs and Pugs Project. And then we also do micro grants to pig sanctuaries and pug rescues in need. Like there's always, a new animal that's been picked up, like a stray, or somebody thinks like they've purchased a micro pig and then it grows large and they have to get rid of it, which happens all the time. And, and so it's like how to help support them whenever they, the sanctuaries are bursting at the seams, and rescues too, and they need support for a lot of the medical conditions. So that is what we like to go in, and I just follow a lot of rescues and sanctuaries on Instagram and Facebook, and whenever I see something in need, I'll go in and we do micro grants. So that's what Pigs and Pugs Project is.
And so one thing that I really love and admire about your work is that you have all of these different projects or aspects of your Kimberly Wilson brand, and you might say, well, what do pig rescues have to do with a fashion line? And somehow you manage to take all of these different things and interests and passions and package them really perfectly underneath your brand. And I remember a few things that you said during your business coaching with me about this. But for someone who does have all of these different interests, how do you balance everything?
It's so funny that you say that because I was just on the call with a friend of mine who we check in from time to time, and she's a business owner out on the West Coast. And we just love to kind of share, like, how are things going? What's working? What isn't working? What are your goals for the season? Things along those lines. We were just talking about how, particularly with my podcast, it's so random because I'll interview animal activists, I'll interview, authors, I'll interview, cookbook authors. Like, that's a podcast I have this afternoon. It's so random. It's like yoga, mindfulness, all sorts of different topics that, of course, like, I'm fascinated with and find really interesting. Definitely creativity is another piece. So lots of artists. But so with this, you're kind of like, if you were just an animal person, you'd be like, what the hell is this podcast, right? Or if you were just like wanting creativity and then I'm like interviewing the farmer from The Last Pig, you might just be like, what in the world? So I appreciate what you just said because I feel like sometimes it can feel a little like, what is this, particularly ongoing evolution as I have changed and evolved. And so, again, I just want to say that I appreciate that you see the connection and the connecting thread. And, really what comes to mind, though, to answer the question is that the connecting thread for me is like this idea of tranquility. It's like woven into everything, right? From the yoga studio, that's tranquil space, to the clothing line, that's tranquility. My books, pretty much all of them have tranquil in the title. And so it's this theme of really, it's not like because I have it all figured out. It's because I'm constantly seeking it too. I am in the constant, I think, like, can I get tranquility here? What about this? Will this book solve it? What about this herb? Or like, what about this supplement? So it's like, I'm trying all these different things to try to bring more tranquility into my life as a type A person. And so that's what I feel like these themes are. So even like with the clothing line, that was created because I wanted clothing that I could go teach yoga in. I could go to business meeting in, and then I could go to school in, grad school, and then I could, go out on a date in, right? So that was the idea kind of behind the clothing line. Again, how do I find tranquility in my everyday style? So that's really, I think, what the theme is and how they all, at least in my mind, maybe not in everyone's mind, but how they all kind of tie together. And what's really interesting, too, is as I, continue to move forward after the sale of the studio, my big hope and my dream is to buy a tiny farmette outside of the city where I can have rescue pigs, have rescue pugs, and allow people to kind of come and meet them in person and, grow veggies, grow cut flowers, and have this like experience of like, how do we find tranquility, outside of the city too, right? It's like, how do we kind of reconnect with ourselves and with nature and with animals in this like special space? So that's my idea on how it ties together. Another piece, though, too, and I wonder if I said this in our mentoring session, is, to me, my big thing kind of with businesses or with things that we create is we want to create an experience of sorts, So like at the yoga studio, there's always lavender spray and tea and cookies. And with my clothing line, we send like a little lavender sachet. And whenever people buy a product from me, like a book or a day book, a journal, something like that, then I always like to wrap it up with like lots of care. And I write beautiful before their name on the package. And, just these little things that's like creating this experience that ideally helps others also experience a dose of tranquility whenever they're exposed to whatever it is that I'm sharing.
And one thing that I definitely notice about your brand is how detail-oriented you are in terms of those little touches. Because I think sometimes for somebody who's a big idea person, it's easy to get sometimes the broad strokes of what it is that you want to create. And one of the things that you did say in that business coaching so many years ago that stuck with me, besides telling me that I should start a podcast, was that you're not always doing all of the things 100% of the time at the same time. Does that still ring true for you?
Yeah. No, absolutely. Like, say for that film screening, okay, I was very intense on like kind of marketing, sharing, and stuffing goodie bags and everything the day of, right? And so, but now my need to be like, all hands on deck with Pigs and Pugs project is a little more removed. And I, had the next day we had the spring photo shoot for Tranquility. So I've been all in on that, getting the spring collection released and things along those lines. So absolutely, it's not like any of these are my full-time focus. I kind of go in and out. They're definitely always on my mind on a daily basis. They come up, but it's not like, okay, so I 2 hours here, 2 hours there, 2 hours there. It's more of just like what needs the most attention now.
Mm-hmm. And for somebody who does have a lot of ideas, and I'm glad that you slipped in there your type A personality and tendencies, because I remember one thing that people used to say to me all the time when I started my yoga business was, oh, you must be so relaxed all the time.
Yeah.
Like, what a cool business to have. It must be so just zen and chill. You must be so zen all the time. I'm like, are you kidding me? Did you not hear the business part of what I just said? Like, this is not
right.
This is not all incense and candles and shavasana. And so I'm glad that you said that. And you said that a lot of what your brand is that desire for tranquility, and how can you bring it in through the work that you're doing and extend that to other people?
Right. Exactly. No, and I totally know what you're saying of just like, oh, yoga studio, that must be so relaxing. I'm like, oh my God, if you had any idea, and it's really interesting. I remember in the early days where it was like just me, and it was, 24/7 for the first few years. And I remember I'd run into like a student, they'd be like, oh, so you just kind of like relax during the day and then you teach at night. And meanwhile, like during the day, there's all this admin and it's nonstop. And you're like, oh, I haven't brushed my teeth and it's 3 p.m., and this was before #girlboss was a thing, right? So I was like trying to figure all of this out on my own with no business training, degree in psychology, and was just like, what am I doing? I just know I want to create something special for Washington, D.C., where people can come and do yoga and feel part of something. Because I feel like in the big cities, we're so disconnected, And so that was my wish for it. And just the irony is, no, I'm trying to create a relaxing experience for you, but this is anything but relaxing for me, anything, because even whenever I would go in to take classes, what I saw was what was wrong. Yeah. There was a light bulb out, there weren't enough cookies on the plate. Like there wasn't a doily on the cookie plate. I mean, like really, I go to that level of detail. And I would see all of this, and it literally was like death by 1,000 cuts.
I'm so glad that I'm not the only one who felt that way with my experience at times. There were so many wonderful things about having a yoga studio and running that business, and so many things that I learned, but I even felt that I needed to sort of stop doing yoga for a little while I was running that business, because it no longer was relaxing to me, because I kept thinking of this or that, and it became so synonymous with work and with striving and with pushing and with everything that was wrong, that I was like, I need to do something else to relax. I can't rely on this anymore. It was really difficult.
Right. I think it looks really glamorous. And again, as you said, there's many, many wonderful things, but it really is not an easy business. I mean, I think, of course, a restaurant would be like much harder, right? Mm-hmm. But I mean, it's just like, oh my God, a yoga business, there's just so much. I remember too, like even last year, we got an email from someone who was like, I got a mosquito bite in the studio, and until all the mosquitoes are removed, I won't be returning. Yes. I mean, just like random, where you're like, oh my God, if I was stronger, I could take this, but I had just gotten to the point where I was like, this stuff is just literally, it's killing me. And so, just like the kind of ridiculous demands. And we tried to create, of course, the most amazing experience possible, but DC was built on a swamp. There are mosquitoes that will enter a door when it's open. So you're just like, oh my God.
And so you said Tranquil Space was 18 years that you...
18. Mm-hmm.
Wow. Yep. And so then what was that like? Because I listened to your podcast episode where you were talking about that transition and the decision to make the sale to Yoga Works. What was that like for you emotionally? Like, what was that cocktail of feelings?
Yeah. The way I would describe it, just because it was succinct, is bittersweet. It's like watching your baby go off to college and you have no more control over this baby's like collegiate years. And yet I also felt like YogaWorks is an organization that's been around 30 years. They have a great reputation. I felt like, people would be in good hands. And so that felt really good. I felt relieved, of no longer having like a massive amount of financial and emotional pressure, for very little benefit or reward. At that point, I was pretty much like pro bono within the business, had been for years. And so, when you're just giving, it really, it just takes a toll emotionally. I think it was definitely time for me to move on. And yet I still deeply cared about people within the organization. Yeah. And, some teachers have been with me 15 years, and so it's like a lot of people have been around a long, long time. And so I didn't want to just be like, goodbye, see ya, peace out, And yet I also knew that it was time to move on. So yeah, there were these conflicting emotions for sure. But I would say overall, I knew it was the right thing. And I also felt like I was leaving the organization in good hands and good shape.
And so with these transitions that you've had in your business and, leaving behind the yoga studio and moving into a private psychotherapy practice, and now you're looking at this, did you call it a farmlet? Is that the word that you used?
Farmette.
A farmette.
Isn't that funny?
A farmette.
Yeah, farmette.
That's so adorable.
But I like farmlet too.
Farmlet.
That's pretty cute too.
It's like, that doesn't feel right, but that's what's coming out of my mouth right now. I want to talk a little bit about imposter syndrome and identity of being the farm rescue person versus the yoga studio person versus the psychotherapist person. Also, as you, like you said, as you shift and grow and develop and you want your brand to grow with you, where does imposter syndrome come up, or does it come up as you're shifting between roles, projects, identities, businesses?
Yeah, it doesn't come up right now, despite the fact that, as you said all that, I'm like, wow, that is really random. It's like yoga studio owner turned farmette owner, living in the country and seeing psychotherapy clients in the city and designing a clothing line. But in a weird way, to me, they all fit together. But it really is, it's a shedding of an identity. We can think of it kind of like a snake shedding its skin when it's outgrown it. And I feel like I love yoga. I deeply believe in it. I highly endorse it. And yet I am no longer interested in being titled or called a yoga teacher. And basically, after I lost my beloved dog a few years ago, I stopped teaching yoga regularly. And I just teach a mindfulness class every week at the studio. And granted, I teach yoga on retreats or what have you. I definitely am still a yoga teacher, but that's not how I identify myself. And so as I think of this transition into a farm life, I will say what's so funny is I already bought a pair of overalls. I was so excited. And I was like, oh, this will get me there. This will help us find the right farmette. But, I do feel like if we keep with this tranquility theme as an example, it's this idea of moving myself out of the city where I will keep a very fast pace, no matter how much I try to slow down. I've definitely slowed down some, but it's a city. You get around quickly, you're always in a hurry, what have you. And so my idea is to take myself out of this scenario and into the country where there's a slower pace. There's growing my own vegetables, my flowers, things along those lines, which I have a tiny little garden here. And I even met with a friend earlier today and we were planting seeds for some heirloom tomatoes and some zinnias and, jalapenos. So it's I can start that, of course, within the city, but there's something about the countryside that just is it's lulling me, pulling me, to go. And yet, kind of as you mentioned, I'm debating, will I live there full time and sell my condo in the city, or will I somehow, and this would be tough to manage, but keep my condo in the city, spend a few days here as I'm seeing clients, and then the rest of the time out in the country. And so I don't know what that's going to look like. I don't have an answer for that. And whenever I think of imposter syndrome, though, I don't think of it so much with my future, even though, okay, I'm not a farmer. I don't know how to drive a tractor. I don't know how to she taught me how to plant seeds today. I usually buy plants already, in the little container that they've already sprouted, and then I put them in a pot. So this was a big deal, planting seeds, so she's trying to help me get my little gardener hat on. But I didn't feel like an imposter there because I'm not out telling people I'm a master gardener.
Right.
But I tell you, when I have felt like an imposter is whenever I'm going to, or I had in the past, if I was going to teach a workshop at the studio, And, and it was on like anything, like I mainly teach like yoga, mindfulness, creativity sort of stuff. And yeah, I'm like racing in there, I'm exhausted. I have definitely overstretched myself. And here I'm going in to teach tranquility.
Yeah.
That's whenever I felt like an imposter, because I'm like, oh, I do know what we're supposed to do. And I do feel like I have those answers and I can help you come up with ideas for practices and I can help support you and I understand the challenges around it. And yet right now in my life at this moment, I'm really struggling with it. So that's where I know that the idea of imposter syndrome has definitely come up for me.
Yeah, that makes so much sense. And I remember getting the advice time and again from business coaches that if you're building a lifestyle brand like what you have and what, I was trying to create at that time, and even that I'm trying to create in a different way at this time, that you are your brand and you are what people are buying into. And so if you are selling tranquility and ease and more flow in your life and well-being, and you're not representing that, you're showing up with circles under your eyes and you quickly inhaled your food 5 minutes before your class, it's like, what exactly are you selling? And what is sort of the subconscious message that your students and or clients are receiving?
Yeah, I was like, did she have a secret video? Because I was like, I totally would scarf down my food, and it was just something like a power bar or something and then go teach. And, you cannot be sustained on things like that. So I love that you said that because, yes, that has been an experience. And that is, it doesn't feel good. It doesn't feel good.
And so what would be your advice? And this could be your entrepreneurial advice, your personal advice, and or your psychotherapist advice for someone who feels like there's somewhere where they are out of alignment with what it is that they believe or what it is that they intellectually know is what they want to be embodying or how they want to be living, but there's something that's out of sync where they're just feeling not quite 100% in their authenticity.
I love that question, and it's funny because, again, with the friend that I was just talking to, we're talking about the fact that I've been working on a book for the past few years, and really that's the exact theme, what you just said. And, this idea of like outgrowing things or feeling like, oh, like the way I'm living isn't necessarily in line fully with my values. And I have an interesting like example or story. I remember asking somebody on a podcast once, like why they made a move from LA to Santa Fe. And she said, I was reflecting on what are my values. And it was like nature and time with family. And I realized that I was doing none of that in LA. So I knew a change of pace by moving to Santa Fe would allow that to happen. And so that really stuck with me. And so maybe that's why, I'm like longing for the countryside and this idea of, I love kind of being out in nature and love being with animals and what have you. And, it is this forced sense of slowing down. And I'd say if you are in a place, well, it's important to notice it and to acknowledge it. There's this great 3 N's that I like to share with people. It's called notice, name, and navigate. So you notice like, something feels a little off. Like I notice when I'm sharing this workshop, like I don't feel great about it, or I don't feel like I'm in alignment with it at this moment. Or whenever I, have a meeting with so-and-so, I realize like I'm not excited about it. Like I'm noticing I feel a little icky, whatever it is, right? And then you name it like, I'm realizing like I need to up my self-care game, or I'm realizing that this is not the industry I want to be in, whatever it might be. And then the last N is navigate. Okay, so then now that you have noticed and named it, you got to make some decisions around it. And so, for some people, it's not going to be moving to the country and borrowing a farmette, right? But it might be that instead they decide that they want to eat less processed foods. And so their diet isn't in alignment with their values. And so they want to start, a little herb garden in their windowsill. I mean, who knows, right? That can be really small things or really big things like leaving jobs, relationships, cities. And I think it's just important that we recognize that, just because we've made one decision doesn't mean we have to stay in it forever. And if you do, it's important to know, are you growing within it or do you feel stagnant? Because to me, like nothing's worse than being or feeling stagnant.
And so you said 3 N's, notice, name, and what was the third one?
Navigate.
Navigate. I love that.
Yeah, I feel like it can be so helpful. I'm in a positive psychology certificate program right now, and that actually I learned in it, and I've been sharing it with clients. I'm like, this is genius. I just think it's so helpful. And then there's something that I read too, that once you name something, like you name the emotion or you name the feeling, that it's like it somehow it calms the amygdala. So it's like it lessens our kind of fight or flight response just by naming it. So we feel it, right? But then do we give name to it? And I thought that was really interesting data too.
Okay, bonus question for you from one podcaster to another. And as something that I'm doing right now in my business is supporting other people in starting and launching their own podcasts as well. Why, way back when, several years ago, why did you recommend to me that I should consider starting a podcast? What has that done for you since you've had it for so many 400 plus episodes?
The reason I encourage it for people, and the irony is that I actually don't listen to podcasts. Isn't that funny? Because I feel like I am someone who I have to take notes. Like I can't just take something in. So, when I'm reading a book or whatever, I mean, unless it's a novel, but it's like I need to take notes. And with podcasts, there's so much good information out there. And the few I have listened to, like I tend to take notes. And, most people, it seems like they listen to them kind of on the go. So they're kind of listening, but they're also doing other things. And I can't do that. And I like a lot of silence. The reason is like for me, I feel that and then starting a blog in 2004, it's like it's allowed me to connect with people well beyond the four walls of the yoga studio. And that was really all I had at that time, right? That was my business. And the only people I would connect with are people who walked through those doors. And so by starting a blog that could be read by anyone in the world, or by starting a podcast, that could be listened to by anyone, it allowed me to connect with and reach other people. And it's been amazing. I remember I had someone in from like South Korea, who came to the studio because she listened to the podcast.
Wow.
I've had people come on retreats that were from, like somebody from Australia actually came on a retreat. And again, she was a podcast listener. So that's the reason I recommend it, is like it allows you, I think, to share more of yourself, more of your personality. And the cool thing is you get to interview some really amazing people. Like I love it,
Right.
I love it for that aspect. And you get to ask them things that you want to know for yourself,
Yeah.
So it's really kind of nice. But, I think if you want to expand your brand and your community and your capacity, I think, podcasting or mediums along those lines where you can reach people beyond like the four walls of your business, if it's brick and mortar, I just think it's a wonderful way to do that.
And last question in our last couple of minutes together here. Is there anything else that you feel like you really want to share with our listeners that we didn't get a chance to say, or anything that's coming to your mind?
I think just kind of circling back to this idea of values and authenticity. And, I think I would just encourage listeners, and I would encourage, myself, like on a regular basis, to do little check-ins. And I encourage these seasonally, where you just kind of check in. And many of you are probably familiar with this like idea of the wheel of life, where you look at the different areas of your life, like spirituality, giving back, health, exercise, things along those lines. And you rate them on a scale from 1 to 10. And you notice, okay, I'm doing really good in this area, but this area I need to up my game, and so doing these regular like bits of reflection, I think can be so helpful to make sure that we're staying on a path that is aligned with our values and is aligned with what we want to bring forth in the world, what matters most to us. So that's the big thing that I would encourage and want to leave your listeners with is, to take time and space for that, because it's really, really important. Nothing's worse than getting further down the line in a relationship or a job or our lives, frankly, and being like, I regret not doing X. Because, they say, studies show we regret more the things we don't do than the things we do. So, whenever we have that little nudge or inkling to take a course or say hello to someone or make a move, then I think it's really important that we listen to that.
Kimberly Wilson, Tranquility du Jour. Please, please, please check out Kimberly's website, kimberlywilson.com. Listen to the podcast, Tranquility du Jour, available wherever you're listening to this, I'm sure. Take a peek at her exceptional clothing line, Tranquility, and all of the wonderful resources that she's offering online. Just a reminder, you have until April 22nd to get the early adopter rate for the Creative Imposters Summer Self-Care Society, and an herbal tea gift from Dina Ranaday of An Herbal Diary for doing so. Of course, even if you're hearing this after the 22nd, I still want you to sign up because there's so many prizes that you will be able to win just by taking the time to take care of yourself. Details are in the show notes, as well as links to all things Kimberly Wilson here in your listening app or at thecreativeimposter.com/067. This episode was mixed by Edwin Ruiz of Mondo Machine. Our theme music is by Jovia Armstrong. I thank you so much for listening. And this week, I'm wishing you the curiosity to see how you can find a little bit more tranquility in your life each and every day.